Alright, this is going to be the start of the tail, putting the tail assembly together, the tail onto the tail boom and everything. Starts on page 31. One nice thing about this kit is once you assemble all the tail and everything, it all stays together. To remove the tail assembly, you don't have to take a belt off around the main shaft or around a tail pulley or something of that nature. So it makes it nice and easy. You can set your tension before you even mount the thing. So we're going to start here. It's bag 4, page 31, and we'll move on to the first step. Alright, you want to pull the parts out of this part of the bag that's got the horizontal stabilizer, the tail boom support mount, and the horizontal stabilizer mount, the tail rod guides, there's the servo mount, the tail servo mount there, and then the screws, and there's also the tail box. So we're not going to use this tail box right away, so it's coming up quick, so hang on to that. But what we want to do is we want to get the tail boom, and we want to slide the horizontal stabilizer mount and the servo mounts onto the tail boom, because after we get everything put together, it's kind of difficult to get them on. You have to take stuff apart again to get to them, so we'll go ahead and do that next. Alright, now we got the servo mounts and the horizontal stabilizer mounted on here, so we won't have to worry about that later. And another thing you're going to want to do at this point is you're going to want to go ahead and install the tail belt into the boom as well, because as we're putting the front and the rear tail boxes on, it's going to, you'll need to have the belt installed to do that. These are the parts that we're going to do for the rear tail box. Here's the two sides, the box, some bearings and spacers, bolts, more spacers and bolts and stuff, and bearing in the tail output shaft. One other thing that you want to take note of when you're doing this is on the front of the tail boom there's a notch, and that notch is going to go to the left hand side as you're looking at the back of the helicopter. So when you put the tail box on, you want the tail output shaft to be on the opposite side of that notch. And that's important. If you don't do that, you'll be tearing it apart, because then your tail is going to be upside down. So just make sure you pay attention to that as you're putting it together. Okay, now we've got the tail box assembled. You're going to want to leave the tail box screws loose, because that's where you're going to set your belt tension. So don't want to blue Loctite those just yet. Wait till you get done completing the entire tail boom assembly. Another thing to note is there's a little set screw, and it goes down into the shaft, the tail shaft here, and it threads in there to lock in the pin that holds the tail pulley on there. So make sure you get some blue Loctite on that and get it down in there, and don't forget about it. It's kind of one of those things that you just might overlook, so don't forget about that. And now we'll move on to the next step, which is putting the tail hub and everything and the tail blade grips on, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so now we're going to put together the tail hub and tail grip assemblies. This is where another one of the addendums comes in. The tail pitch slider stock is trailing edge controlled for the blade grips. We want to move it to leading edge control, so you'll have to disassemble that, put this new pitch plate on there, and that'll switch that control over. So make sure you do that. We got our bearings, some little spacers, make sure you don't drop them, your tail bell crank, washers, blade grips, hub, plastic tail blades, and lastly we got these thrust washers that go inside the bearing grips, or the blade grips. So make sure you first pack them with some grease, and when you install them, make sure you put the one with the larger OD or ID towards the center, and then also make sure that the open end of the ball race is facing towards the center as well. That way your grease won't fling out all over the place. So we'll go ahead and put all this together and come back and show you the final product. Alright, now we've got the tail hub assembly done. One other thing I forgot to mention is there's another addendum part to this. They give you a package with 3 M2.5 lock nuts, nylock nuts, or M3 nylock nuts. and those are used back here. They just didn't put enough in the kit, so they just gave you some in a package with an addendum. I didn't put the plastic blades on for now, and just don't want them to get in the way. So everything's on there. Pitch plate has been changed now, so we've got leading edge control. This is a little stiff yet, so probably need to just resize the ball links a little bit and get some oil on the slider and get it freed up and everything. But I'll work on that later, and I'm sure, you know, as you go through there, you'll find some other things you need to work on. But that's the completed rear tail box now. Now we're going to move to the front, which is starts up on page 34. Okay, now we're going to start doing the front tail box. Here's the parts out of that bag. There's a gyro plate that mounts on top of the tail box when you're done. The tail box itself, some spacers, the transmission gear, the axle that it rides on, you know, the various nuts, bolts, and washers that are needed to assemble it. Another thing that you're going to want to take note of, looks like they have it wrong in the manual. When you get this belt installed, get it without a twist. Then when you install it onto that front transmission, give it a quarter turn clockwise, looking at it. Quarter turn clockwise. And that'll get it turning the right way so that the tail blades are spinning up into the rotor wash. So we'll go ahead and get that put together, and we'll come back and look at it. Okay, so now we've got the front tail drive assembly done. And you know, as you can see, you can go ahead now and set your belt tension, because this is it. You know, when you're ready to mount the tail, it just mounts at these 4 points, and this meshes up to the tail drive gear, and you're good to go. So you don't have to set any tensions or anything when you mount this to the main frame. So what I do with this is I push the rear tail case as far forward as possible, and then I just tension it here and tighten it down and get my good belt tension, and it's ready to go. Also, just make sure when you're putting this together that you don't forget to put the 2 set screws in here for the shaft that this tail drive gear, transmission gear rides on. And other than that, it's pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and set it aside for now. I don't want to put it on the helicopter while I'm trying to shoot these videos, and just makes it harder to move the helicopter around. So we'll move on to the next step. Alright, next up we're going to do the tail control rod. Get the servo mounted, get it attached to the tail and all that. You're going to need your tail control rod. It's in the same package as the tail boom. There's some link end or rod ends, and then some screws for it. And then you're also going to need your tail rod guides, because you're going to need to slide these on before you put the ends on, or you won't be able to get them through there. So go ahead and get all that stuff out. A couple of things to pay attention to when you're doing this. You know, make sure you get your link rod ends put on the right way, so they'll snap onto the balls on the tail and the servo the correct way. And that's really about it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get the servo centered up, and then get it centered and get the pitch slider centered. So we'll go ahead and do that next. Okay, now we got the tail rod installed, hooked up with the servo, and now the servo's mounted as well. You want to make sure that the rod is going, you know, straight down the tail boom. I haven't secured these yet, just in case I need to take them off later or whatever, but I'll probably do that last. But, you know, get your tail pitch slider centered up, and then, you know, make sure you're centered up on your servo, and then make sure your servo rod is running straight down the boom, and that's all there is to it. One nice thing about this helicopter is, you know, the tail is one complete unit. You know, it comes right out, so you can do all this setup right on, you know, without having it attached to the helicopter. So that's kind of cool. But all right, so time to move on to the next step.